Welcome to FaithWorks Live. It is my joy to be with you, breathing that free air in the state of Iowa. It's my absolute favorite thing between you, me, and the microphone to just be able to talk about what it looks like to live out our faith in this crazy old, chaotic, mixed up world. But we are here for such a time as this. And it's been an exciting time in my backyard because we've got a primary season that's heating up. It has been for some time, honestly. But there's a lot of momentum that's going on. And specifically, I'm hearing a few different names that have bubbled up to the surface because it is a 5-person primary on the Republican side, and the Democrats are doing their own thing. But it is exciting to get the chance to meet all of these leaders that are vying to be our representatives at the executive level in our state. And one that I've just recently met, and I think there's an awful lot of buzz going on about, is Zach Lahn, and he joins us today. Zach, it's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, it's just something I've been hearing about, quite honestly. Like one of my friends texted me and she goes, "I'm so excited." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I've never been so excited about a candidate before." I said, who are you referring to?" And she was talking about you. So to begin every good conversation with a compliment, there are people who are very excited about what it is they're hearing from you because in their eyes, you're presenting something very different, something non-traditional. And is it fair to say that you're running a bit of a non-traditional campaign, especially for a Midwestern conservative?
Yeah, I think we are. I'm an outsider. I've never ran for office before. I'm not in government. I don't work in government. So this is something that's very new to me, and I'm bringing a different message because it's the message that I really care about. My neighbors are talking about. I think about it when we're talking about our kids and health, and so we're really bringing a different message. But I don't think it's even purposefully different. It's just relevant, and I think it's what people really have been waiting to hear. And I happen to be the messenger that's bringing it to the forefront in Iowa. I'm very happy to do it. Today I was talking to my son Hudson, and he was talking about the primary because we have seen a lot of momentum in this race. Actually, I just saw polling back yesterday that really shows it's a 2-person race, and it's either going to be myself or Randy Feenstra that wins on election night. And we were talking about, what happens, win or lose. And I just said to him, Hudson, in many ways, I've already won. And what I mean by that is, think of the message that we've been able to put forward in the state of Iowa. Win or lose in the primary, and I absolutely hope and intend and pray to win, but we've been able to bring issues of health, of cancer crisis, of water quality, of our kids leaving the state, of making our public education system better, of taking hold of what should be ours in Iowa, our land, our heritage and agriculture. We're bringing these things to the forefront because I believe they truly matter. And I was just telling my son that God's putting me in this place for a reason. And I feel like me just walking forward, no matter what the feeling might be, whether it's like I feel excited or I feel nervous, just walking forward and putting those things out has been very important. And regardless of the outcome of the primary, just the fact that so many more candidates are now talking about these issues shows, we have a winning message, and there's been success already.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you're right to see it that way because moving the conversation forward is a huge element. If you can drive what is being talked about on the campaign trail, and especially if you can be the one that's there first. And I know just in our short acquaintance that you are a guy who does your research. Like you always have sites and statistics to back it up. And that's so fascinating. It also means that, one question about education could turn into a half an hour restructuring debate, which is also pretty fun.
Yeah, no, it's sometimes I'm I have to, usually for politicians, it goes something like this. They have a talking point, and the talking point is, I would call it a bumper sticker. And so if they're asked about a certain subject, and in their mind, it goes, okay, go to this bumper sticker, and okay, I stick to that, stick to my message, stay on it, and don't get off of it. And that gives them a very easy 30-second to 1-minute answer. The thing I struggle with the most are 30-second to 1-minute answers. It's condensing down deep thoughts into, a concise format, because I do like to think and talk more deeply about these things. That's why I've been loving our town hall meetings that we've been having so much. And we've been, Oskaloosa, the day we met, that night, we had 200 people that showed up to Oskaloosa, and we're, there for an hour, speaking. And then I stayed for another hour and a half just answering questions. And so this is what I believe people are asking for from the representatives. And I think the key is being on the side of the people. if you're not on the side of the people, you don't want to answer questions for very long, or you don't even want to show up
Hmm.
publicly. But if you are one of the people and you're coming at things from a common sense standpoint, I really believe that's where we win. And that's what I love doing.
Sure. Well, and I love that aspect of your campaign and the way you're running it. It is very conversational. It is very people focused and people first. And I think that can feel like a breath of fresh air to a lot of folks, especially as you're coming out. I would say it's non-traditional, and I consider that to be a good thing. I do recognize how challenging that probably is, though, from a political standpoint, especially now as we're nearing the end of the race, and you've
Hmm.
got to make sure that the dyed in the wool, party faithful people are coming out because
Yeah.
they're the ones most likely to vote for you in the primary. So do you have kind of that strategy? Do you have any sense of how all of that is going more on the political side? And then we'll get into some of the issues as well.
Yeah. Well, first off, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is, part of the challenge that I've had with as an outsider with a very different message has been that I need to also make sure I'm talking about some of these traditional conservative issues, which are very important to me. My very first memory ever politically was praying outside of a Planned Parenthood with my dad, and then we caucused for Alan Keyes not too long after that. I've been involved in these types of efforts for a very long time. I actually ran political campaigns right out of college for a handful of years before I went more into business. And, but the issues I'm bringing up that we'll talk about are issues that I believe are not even right or left. They're just Iowa issues. And that's why I think this is cutting through so much is, we're talking about issues that both parties have kind of been afraid to talk about. And people ask me, why is that? And I would say, follow the money. You can really quickly get to why people aren't talking about this, but why politicians aren't talking about this, but the people are, if you just follow the money.
Hmm.
And so for me, something I have to consistently remind myself to do is make sure I'm also covering those points that are really important to me.
Yeah.
The pro-life points, the pro-Second Amendment points, the taxes and regulations. But I think the legislature has done a really good job at protecting and promoting these things. And what I'm coming forward to say is that, hey, we have systemic issues that we really need to tackle. And I want to take those on head on, regardless of what entrenched interests I might upset. And so dyed in the wool conservatives that are getting out to vote, they need to know, number one, I my conservative credentials. But number two, they also need to know we have a different vision we're casting forward for the state of Iowa, and I hope that they can come along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I will give you ample opportunity to talk about the life issue. That's the heartbeat of our show, and it's number one, no matter what. And the OG listeners know, like that's why we're here is to protect life, to defend life. I've always called it the most important issue this side of eternity. So if you want to just share a few words about why specifically that issue matters to you, and feel free to extend that because in our conversation before, you were talking about how things like water quality, land quality,
Yeah.
being able to pass on your land and the inherent right to be able to own that property and leave a legacy for your family. You also cast those as pro-life issues. So talk a little bit about that if you
Yeah.
would.
Well, yeah, I think first I'm very clear. I'm pro-life at conception, and I've been that way basically my entire adult life, as far back as I remember. And when I get in arguments or debates with people about this, it's just like, well, once you have a fertilized egg, what else is it than a human? And once you have that belief that that's what it is, it cannot become anything else, then that's a life. And the only choice we have,
Mm-hmm.
the right choice we have, is to protect that life and defend that life. And so that sort of to me has been just the foundational truth that I was raised with. My dad has been a pastor for a couple decades, and these things, like I said, have been some of my earliest memories about what's been most important, especially growing up in the 80s and 90s. The battle was intense. I mean, it was intense then because it was shortly after Roe v. Wade, and we saw like um the faith portion of the right especially really get energized about something that is so foundationally important. There's nothing more foundationally important than life. It just doesn't exist. And as you said, it's the most important this side of it of eternity, because without it, there's nothing else that you can even fight for. And I remember hearing people say these things. Isn't it funny that all of these people that are fighting to promote abortion were not aborted, that they've been
Oh,
blessed with life to do this? And so this has been a key issue. But I often say that, well, first, the legislature, I believe, has done a really good job at protecting life. I would take it further. I do believe that there's other things we can do. I mean, there should be no such thing as an abortion pill via mail. It just shouldn't exist. That's something that, number one, I don't like these in the first place. I'm opposed to them. But number two, we have to have this as a discussion face to face with a doctor, and like understanding what's really going on here. The wrong thing to do is to make it easy and flippant and to sort of devalue what's happening through this process, because again, this is a life issue. This is the core issue.
Mhm.
So, but I have taken it further, and this is to say that, Republicans have done a really good job at protecting and promoting life before birth. But after, life, the fight for life doesn't end at birth, and it can't end at birth. For a long time, we say we need to protect life from conception to natural death. But in Iowa, in many cases, natural death is coming earlier and earlier. And so when we talk about, getting clean water, we talk about lowering our cancer rates. We talk about safe medications and vaccines. We talk about healthy food. These, to me, are also pro-life issues. And I think we need to couch them as that, because if we don't, we run the risk of losing on the other side of this, and then we'll have what we have in Iowa, which is, we're going to funerals of people who are 65 whose parents lived to be 80. I mean,
Mm.
we're losing the entire wisdom of a generation. On the side prior to birth, we're losing 100% of the potential of the individual. There's a baby that has not been born yet is nothing but potential. It could be anything. It could do anything. It could solve any problem. We're completely losing unbridled, unburdened potential. On the other side of this, when you talk about people that are older, we're completely losing wisdom. We're losing the traditions and the wisdom that we need from people that have lived life and have these things to share with us. And so this life issue is so important, because we need the potential of the individual that's
Mhm.
hasn't been born yet, and we also need the wisdom of the one that has been here and seen things and can help us carry on our culture and traditions.
Yeah. And I know that's something that is really driving a lot of passion behind your support base, is your discussions of health and quality of life as well. Again, that should be something that's across party lines, but at the same time, it does seem like it's been kind of a new focus for on the conservative side, the Maha movement and things like that. And
Yeah.
I know for me, it was something that I was newly awakened to in the era of COVID. And suddenly we have these discussions about whether or not government can mandate that we're doing population level experiments on our people. And, just something as simple as whether or not you can go outside, or whether or not you can have face to face interactions with human beings.
Go to
And that to
church.
me was the biggest, go to church. I mean, hello, like the biggest encroachment on personal freedoms I have ever seen in my lifetime happen in America. And just that alone changed so much. And I know that I'm not alone. And
No.
so I would like to spend a little time about your vision about not only just health, like good quality of health, but
Yeah.
also the government's role and personal freedoms as well.
Yeah. Well, first, I think what you're talking about happened during. By the way, this entire what seems like delusion that we went through during COVID is just being memory hold. We're like being taught to sort of just forget about it, just let the whole thing slide. I've been very clear. Anthony Fauci needs to be prosecuted for these things. The amount of deaths that will occur from the COVID vaccine is something we will actually never fully understand. Right now, the COVID vaccine
Mm.
has 10 times the levels of adverse effect reports in the VAERS database than the average vaccine. 10x the level of reports. I tell people, the swine flu that came out in the 70s, there's a vaccine for it in the 70s. It had an adverse effect rate of 1 in 100,000, the vaccine did, and it was pulled off
Mm.
the market. The COVID vaccine has an adverse effect rate of 1 in 800, and it's still on the market. We have no actual clue the extent to which this is going to cause myocarditis, pericarditis, to cause blood clotting, to cause systemic inflammation, metabolic issues, chronic autoimmune conditions. We have no clue, and I think that's part of the kind of the understanding there is that we won't get the true science. I think Bobby Kennedy's really fighting to get it, but he is in such a swamp machine out there. But sorry, I'm getting a bit worked up about this because these are things I really, really care about. And and when I get in debates with people on the left about this, it's as if we're just not dealing in reality. So when we talk about some of these things that we experienced during COVID, number one, on the emergency powers, I would like to see in Iowa the emergency powers pushed to the lowest level possible. Counties should have far more say over emergency powers than the state should. And that's because our government is set up in such a way that decentralized authority is a protection against tyranny. And so even at the, we are all very nervous about centralized federal power, which we should be, because throughout history, throughout the world, it's done atrocious things. But centralized state power is also not a good thing. We need to have decision rights as low as humanly possible because it is how we keep tyranny at bay. So that's one thing I've already said is that, there's this debate about taking away the governor's emergency powers right now. And people are talking about it in terms of, well, what if we get a Democrat governor? We need to, limit that. I'm talking about it like, who cares who the party in power is? We need to limit those powers because we are sovereign individuals that deserve to have these decision rights as low as possible at the local level. So I think in the MAHA movement in general, it really is, I said this in an event the other day. I had an uncle who once told me he was with my kids and he was helping us out on the farm doing something. And he told my kids, there's two ways to do something, the right way and again. And I really loved how he said that. But I think in terms of what we're talking about with health, we are in the again part of the conversation because we didn't do it the right way. We've let big business consolidate every industry that matters to our health, whether it's the medical industry, whether it's a big food, whether it's agriculture, whether it's pharma, meat packing, whatever it is. We've seen consolidation, which has taken away choices for the consumer and allowed for corporate cronyism to encroach within our government to put profits of big companies ahead of the health of the people. And that's just completely wrong. So in the state of Iowa, I'm calling for some very simple things. Number one, we have 95%, we have the best land in the world, and we import 95% of our food. I would love Iowa to lead on the real food revolution that we could have in this country. And we have the best farmland to do it. Now, granted, I get we have 25 million acres of ground. It's not going to be an overnight change that we make a huge dent. But as we push for policies that promote regenerative type of farming practices, alternative crops that we can grow, more young farmers getting onto land, we are going to see a complete shift in some of the incentive structures that will allow farmers that are on the sideline that are looking for markets to get into the game and help produce healthier, more sustainable food for our kids. And so one of the policies I'm pushing is that as governor, I'm going to fight until 80% of the food served in our public schools is grown in the state of Iowa. And I think that will have a tremendous impact on the health and well-being of our kids, but also on the economies of our local communities, because we need to do it, that it needs to come from within a certain radius of each of the schools that it's being bought from. And by creating those markets, you will give the signal to people that they can start to get into this, raising grass-fed beef or moving towards pasture-raised chickens or something like that. And that they know it's going to be going to their local school district to help, serve kids a healthy meal versus something coming from, a large truck and from an industrial operation that is a conglomerate that's often foreign owned.
Yeah, which segues nicely into another subject of your passion, I know, which is education and your experience there. And I've heard you talk about a lot of ways that we can regain that top spot and that top respect. Like that used to be a big bragging point in Iowa, was how good the education system is. And I dare say we still can. We still have very smart people and a lot of, we want to have a better future for our kids, obviously. And I would say a lot of the downward slide, we've backslidden, my grandpa would say, We've
Yeah,
backslidden. And
that's
the
just
problem it tends to do more with the institutionalization of
yeah,
education as opposed to focusing on the student and actually teaching them valuable skills as well as morals. And
yeah.
so I'd like to hear a little bit about, just in short, because I know you're a super busy guy, and you could probably talk about this for several hours. But
I could.
what can we do? What's your target for our schools? And I would say specifically, how are we going to do that in the current environment that is so controlled from the top down with influence of institutions, unions, government,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah. Well, first, you are exactly right to even to talk about institutions. And, I used to read books, like the Solinsky's Rules for Radical and some of these, the Art of War, like this, to understand how communism, Marxism, how these organizations really function. I used to read these in college because I was so interested in it. And I remember what stuck out to me the most is that what they target are the institutions of our society. They know that's what they have to get through to because, what our ancestors have done and what Christianity has done in Western civilization has built up some of the strongest, most resilient, most morally focused and centered institutions that the world has ever seen. That is a direct outpouring of our faith. That's where that comes from. And largely it comes from the New Testament in the person of Jesus Christ and how he showed as an example of how we should live our lives. So what does the left want to attack first? The first things they want to attack are the institutions of society to subvert them. And so you can see that in business, you can see it in churches, you can see it in government, and you can see it tremendously in education. And why education? I say this because, education is one of the top places of focus for these ideas to come into. And it goes back to this quote I read when I was reading G.K. Chesterton's treatise on education. And he said this. He said, the basic fundamental principle about education should be that the oldest ideas in our society should be taught to the youngest people. And we are now seeing the left do the opposite of that. They're taking ideas that are 15 minutes old, half baked, and they have no actual moral foundation, no foundation in reality. Things like that you can change your gender, something as absurd as something like that. And they are teaching them to kids as truth. Well, as G.K. Chesterton
Mm.
said, that's the exact opposite of what we do. The oldest ideas go to the youngest kids. As you get older, you can debate these ideas, but it's not until you have this foundation of truth that you're operating within. And that's what they're doing. I like to say this is a strategy that they have. Bring these new ideas that have no real foundation into the classroom and you teach the most vulnerable of people who believe up front that adults have their best interests at heart and that an adult wouldn't lie to them about something like this. And then try to implant a vision that ultimately is there to subvert our culture. That's ultimately what it's there for.
Yeah.
So when I see education, number one, I see we have to get back to that principle from G.K. Chesterton to teach the oldest stories, the oldest books, the oldest truths about society. Because I do have to go here in a minute. Just we're driving to another. I love this conversation, but in the school you started, yeah, on learning by doing, to take charge of your own education. But the other thing that it is teach history from a classical standpoint of teaching the great books and great. Those are the places we need to start. Prepare young people to a calling that's higher, to a sacrificial calling, ultimately Jesus Christ. And that story, a lot of the crux of this, putting your cross on your back, bearing it, and walking up the hill. This is that idea in Western culture that virtues that we do for each other, we do for our culture, we do for our families, and that comes directly from the of Jesus Christ, the story that the Son of God gave to us when He.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for fighting valiantly against some tech struggles. I know you're on the road. As we wrap up here, I just wanted to offer you the chance to share a little bit, maybe like one last pitch as to why voters, and specifically voters that want to vote their values, should support you in this primary.
key issues we're taking on of keeping Iowa's kids in Iowa, all of those issues, my top issues, because they are key to preserving our culture as a people. And the underlying culture that we have is one that is built on our faith, built on Western civilization. And that's the entire reason I'm running this campaign, is I want my own children to understand their story. I want our kids to understand that they're here for something great, and the lack of their best hurts everything. And that we have amazing figures in our own history that, because of their dedication to our faith and our culture, sacrifice to give them something amazing. And my goal is to bring as much attention to this as I possibly can, to move us away from talking about politics and taxes and regulation, and move us into talking about who we are as a people and the culture that we need to preserve. So I would ask your listeners for support. June 2nd is our primary. Would love to have the support. Vote early. ZachLahn.com. You can find out more.
Do you think it will be decided on June 2nd?
I do. The data shows me that, yes. Oh, yeah. The data shows me that I'm decided on June 2nd, and myself or Randy Feenstra, and we have a real opportunity to win on June 2nd. This is the exact reason why the Des Moines Register is starting to attack me and actually starting to praise Randy Feenstra. They do not want Rob Sand to have to go against us.
It's fascinating stuff. And I have, having seen so many political seasons in Iowa, I'm always just standing back and praying, Lord, your will be done in our state. I want our state to be the beautiful bastion of freedom that it can be, and that it should be that for our next generation, as well as honoring the legacy that we come from. And so I think we can live out our values in this arena as well as every other. And so I will continue to pray for you and your family as you're on the campaign trail, and that your faith will remain strong, and that his will be done in this race. So I appreciate your time today, Zach. Thanks so much.
Rebecca, thanks for making this happen. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
And until next time, we have a threefold mission, as always, which is to love God, to serve people, and to live free. Thanks for listening to FaithWorks Live.